Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Cordeiro Grant, founder and CEO of GORGIE, a clean energy meets wellness brand. And today I am so excited to be welcoming Sallie Krawcheck to the stage. Sallie, say hello to everyone.
Hello to you and hello to everyone. It's good to be here.
So today we have an exciting session currently about investing in equality, women, wealth, and well-being. I'm not normally one to read from a paper, but I really want to tee up this session properly, so I'm going to. Here we go. Join us today as we have a thought-provoking fireside chat with Sallie. She's going to delve into critical topics that impacts women's financial well-being, both personally and professionally. She's discovered practical strategies to bridge the retirement savings gap, secure financial independence at every life stage. Thank you. And break down barriers in financial services. So whether you're a member of a women's group or a business leader, this session is here to offer you valuable insights and inspiration. And we are going to dive right in because having someone like Sallie's time is precious. So we're not wasting 1 second. Okay. Question number one for you is, as a prominent figure in the financial world, what inspired you to focus on empowering women in finance through Ellevest? And I just personally have to thank you because I'm terrible at it personally, great at it professionally.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I spent my whole career on Wall Street. I always say if it was a big, ugly bank, I was there. I ran Merrill. I was CFO of Citigroup. I ran the Citi Private Bank in Smith Barney. And always sort of as background noise, recognized I was one of the very few women amongst men, and that there were likewise very few women clients for these wealth management companies. That, I always say there's perfect product market fit for middle-aged white men in the existing wealth management industry. They don't leave their financial advisor until the day they leave this earth, in general. But there's no product market fit for women. In the year after their husband's death, women leave at a rate of about 70 to 80%. And the industry had an explanation for it, which is essentially boiled down to it's women's fault. They are not as good at math. They don't like investing. They're risk averse. They need more financial education, whatever range of reasons it was. That obviously it was not them. It was women. And I sort of bought into that too. I also, I think you go to any Wall Street firm today and you hear women are risk averse, and we receive those messages from childhood that there's something wrong with us. We're risk averse. We're not as good with the money. That if we want money, we're greedy. We're grasping. We're bitchy, et cetera. So those messages to women, and then the industry, sort of playing that out. And I had sort of a eureka moment a handful of years ago where I said, maybe it's not women's fault. Maybe it's actually that an industry where 98% of mutual fund dollars are managed by men and 99% of dollars managed in the industry are at companies owned by men and 86% of financial advisors are men. Maybe they built a business for themselves. Maybe they built it men for men. I'm not saying they meant to, but maybe that's just what you do.
That's right.
And then what if we instead had a company, just one, just Ellevest, that really centers women, and where we built it from the ground up based on women's needs and women's preferences.
I mean, every word you just shared really hits the nail on the head for me. I mean, I grew up, spent my 20s in New York City. We're talking 2002, right, through 2020. And I still feel like when I left, it was very similar to exactly what you described from beginning to end. There was just more chatter about it, as I, was leaving, but not a lot has changed. And so, I mean, from the outside looking in, there's a lot has changed. Ellevest is here, right? You're here. We're having this panel, right? But I guess my real question is, what inspired you to become a champion on this forefront, seeing how big the barrier and the hill is?
Yeah, well, I definitely did not realize how much work it would be. Let's be honest. You just I'm going to go tackle this, and if not me, who? If women aren't investing as much as men are, which means they're not building the wealth that men are, which means they're not living the full lives that men are, which means that in some relationships that money, which means they can be on the wrong end of that, that they can't leave the terrible relationship and they can't leave the terrible job. And seeing this and recognizing that, by the way, we talk about the pay gap, which white women earn 80 something cents to a white man's dollar. And for women of color, it's much less. Well, the gender wealth gap is 30 cents to a white man's dollar and a penny for Black women and a penny for brown women. And so to see that and know what the solution is, which is to invest, and then to have had the opportunities I've had and the career that I had, that I got to do these things and be in these rooms and learn these things and have these experiences, not that very few other women have had, that very few other people have had. And that what I'm going to walk away from it. And believe me, being an entrepreneur was not the first choice. I went to the CEO of one of the large banks and said, hey, this is this opportunity. I'll help you build it. To which he said, is that really needed? Don't their husbands manage their money for them? Literally, this guy, literally, this CEO, who was one of the younger ones, said that to me. And so if there were a way to do it where I didn't have to go out and raise venture money and I didn't have to build a company from scratch, believe me, I would have done it. But the change in culture, Michelle, was so great that it had to be something that really was from the ground up.
Oh, I mean, it's amazing because, I didn't grow up saying I was going to be an entrepreneur. I spent a decade, almost two, in corporate fashion and retail, working for brands like Victoria's Secret, VF Corp, et cetera. But I became an entrepreneur because I saw a different life for myself. My mentors, my female leaders, I loved what they did, but I didn't like how they had to do it. And so to your point, it's like, shockingly, a lot of us have become entrepreneurs because there wasn't another way. And so you've done so much work on this forefront. For me to say that we haven't done a lot is actually wrong. I'm an eternal optimist, and so much has changed. So in what you've seen transition and evolve, how do you see the role of employers in supporting, women's financial well-being and career advancement, especially now that we have more female leaders and C-suite holders?
Well, I think it's a big responsibility. One that we haven't made enough progress on yet. I believe CEOs absolutely believe in the power of diversity, and believe in, recognize some of the inherent and implicit biases that exist and work hard to bring the right programs and policies and procedures to the companies. The bottom line is, middle management is where diversity goes to die. And that, you go to a few of these sessions, but if you're not held accountable, how in the world, as a middle manager, what are you doing? Promoting 2 people a year? Hiring 1 person a year? Okay, 5. You're hiring 5 people a year, right? But you have a lifetime of internalized messages that men are business people and women are moms, or that men are aggressive and that's fine, but women, if they're aggressive, are bitchy. And you have this lifetime. Even for me, I remember when we were doing promotions one year, and this is some time ago, but that, a young man was described as aggressive, driven, definitely breaks some eggs, really gets things done. We decided, the team that was reviewing the promotions promoted him. The next one up was a woman who was aggressive, breaks some eggs. I mean, she gets things done, but nobody likes her. Well, let's get her a coach. And that was me. And someone else in the group, and actually it was HR as well, but it was someone else in the group who sort of broke it and said, wait a second, do we realize what we just did? And we stopped and reverted. So I do think there's a belief in the power of diversity. I think without really holding people accountable to it, not try, but do.
Yeah.
That you must do this as part of your job. You will have a diverse team.
Right.
If you do not have a diverse team, you will not get your bonus. That's the way things get done in corporate America.
Right. Do you have any examples of where you've seen it done well?
Ellevest.
There you go.
Because it's part of our core value for us. What do they say with startups? By the time you're at 13 people, your diversity is set.
Right.
And so you have to get that first 13 people right. And, in our early days, I remember, I think I was out on the West Coast. It was a Saturday morning. my co-founder and I were catching up on something on a call, and he said, oh, that social media person that we're going to hire, which is going to report to a gal who reports to a woman who reports to you. It was between two candidates. One of the candidates was a white woman. The other candidate was a woman of color. Maybe I think it was a non-binary individual of color. And they're real close, but I just wanted to tell you that the hiring manager came out to the white woman. It was close.
Right.
And I said, it was not close. It was not close. If she thinks it was close, it wasn't, because of course she's drawn more to the individual who is like her, who makes her more comfortable. So if you think it was 48-52, it was 30-70 or something like that.
Right.
And I said, so she's going to hire the non-binary individual. To which my co-founder said, well, we can't let him do that, because you got to give the hiring manager the ability to make her decisions, tell her what our goals are, hold her accountable, later, blah, blah, blah. And I said, nope, I refuse. And I know people are like cringing, like you overrode. And then he said something like, well, we want to be a meritocracy. I said, I don't know that I want to be a meritocracy. I worked on Wall Street. It's a meritocracy, which means, it was a mantocracy,
right,
because everybody thought they were hiring the best and the brightest, but what they were hiring was the person they thought was the best and the brightest, who was the person who reminded them so darn much of themselves.
Yeah.
And I've taken investments from the Melinda Gates and the Rethink Impacts and the Penny Pritzkers and all of these wonderful people. And I'm not going to take away my experience and knowledge from all those years and throw it out the window so that this young manager can learn a lesson. I'm going to tell her what the lesson was and force that diversity early on. And again, I know some people won't agree with it, but you got to push for the diversity early and make the hard decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a lot about why, in my opinion, startups are able to thrive and evolve in a way that public, I say public, legacy brands aren't, because it's harder to change later when you're vast versus when you're, small and nimble, a little dinghy on the water. You can make decisions in whatever direction you feel is right, and have merit in it. So, we talked about examples of where it's done well, Ellevest, in places where it's not done well, which is, the vast majority of where we are seeing what's going on in the world. How can women effectively advocate for themselves and their financial goals professionally?
It's a tough one, because we're putting the systemic issues onto her. And I know we want that, right? We buy all the books, and where there's the whole, section of the bookstore of how to get ahead and how to, lean in this way and own it that way and be worth it this other way and all that stuff, all of which, feels good because it's steps we can individually take, but it's hard for an individual to overcome systemic issues. What I will say is, firstly, is that you with a piece of paper? Yeah. So the one thing I would say is, before taking a job, make sure to look up. And if you look to the C-suite and you don't see yourself reflected there, that is an important bit of information. And I know you can't do that for everybody. If you got one job offer, you take the job, right? But if you do have a few of them, look up. And if you're not reflected there, it's 2024. It's not like people haven't heard of diversity before. That is a company that may be saying the right things, but is not doing the right thing. I would look at who has been promoted in your area. Who are the last 4 people who got promoted? And if it's 4 people who are just look the same, and one of these things is not like all the things are the same, then you have to ask yourself questions about that as well. I would look to whatever diversity group they have. Is there a woman's ERG, a woman of color ERG, a non-binary individual ERG? Because then you start to take it from me individually trying to ask for the raise in a certain way to some strength in numbers, where the conversation for you with your boss about, hey, I think the maternity leave is 3 days. I think that's a little rough. I think we use more than 3 days. It's a tough conversation. By the way, when I had my daughter, my maternity leave was 2 weeks. And that was because they never had a maternity leave, because no woman had had a child before. And so when they asked me what I wanted, I'm like, 2 weeks. Is that the right amount of time? 2 weeks?
Vacation time, right? I don't know.
But having that conversation on your own is a very difficult conversation to have. Doing it under the auspices of an ERG, planting that seed and having the ERG work with the leadership team in a sort of collaborative problem solving way, is, we're losing a lot of new parents. Have we looked at how many we're losing that we don't want to lose? Well, companies that have got longer parental leaves, tend to keep their parents longer. What a win-win, right? That's a better conversation to seed an ERG with, as opposed to trying to do that on your own.
Incredible. Let's get into some of the misconceptions and myths out there that you and your team have been working, very hard to debunk. What are some of the common myths and misconceptions about women and money? And I've heard you share some of these, really strong facts that honestly had stuck with me.
Well, so I hit on a little bit of it before, women are risk averse. Women are not good with money. Women overspend. Women, aren't good at math. Women do not enjoy trading. Just women are flibbergadgets. And the reason those myths are there is because media feeds us those myths from childhood, essentially. In sort of every way, right? My friend Reshma Sojani talks about how boys are taught to be brave. That's true with money too. Take a risk. Girls are taught to be perfect. Don't go up to the top of the jungle gym. You may fall off and, mess up your clothes or something. But same with money. In grade school, they get the same messages. Little boys get better grades for the same answers as little girls in math. And then, when you get to adulthood, the media, male money media, is very much about abundance and trading and crypto, and it's CNBC and it's Bloomberg, and there's, it's money coming in and money going out and money going up and money going down. And it's this joyous thing, a little drama, but just this fun, joyous thing. For women, when you look at women's media, it's about how, Carrie Bradshaw bought so many shoes, she couldn't afford the apartment. Financial planning doesn't have to be really, really hard. The pumpkin spice latte. I mean, don't buy the latte. Ridiculous, right? But it's almost, pumpkin spice latte is like peak misogyny season, mocking women for the choices of small expenditures. And we internalize all of this, and men internalize it as money is strength and power, and women internalize it as money is scarcity, and loneliness and isolation and uncertainty. And by the way, it's not just the media saying it to her. She looks around and she says, "You're damn right. I do have less money than men do. My fault. The media is telling me this, and then I am observing this. So now I'm internalizing that I am bad with money. And so I better let him manage it. I just gave him all the power, by the way. I better let him manage it," as opposed to women looking around and saying, "You know what? I'm making 80 cents to his dollar. The industry wasn't built for me. I don't feel comfortable investing at a place that is Ellevest. Not my fault. Not my fault. In fact, I'm doing great given that I started out behind." But women instead internalize it. And so the ripple effects of this are so tremendous, because if you're not good with, so in your personal life, you're outsourcing money to him, right? And by the way, there's, no domestic abuse without financial abuse. So in some relationships, that is a really, really awful thing. But even who gets to choose, where to go on Saturday night, right? So there's an imbalance of power, that occurs. But, on a macro basis, the economy isn't as big as it could otherwise be if women had more money and were investing more. Society is not as strong as it could be. Politics are not as balanced as they could be. So these negative messages ripple. Not as many women go to Wall Street. Not as many women go into venture. Well, what do? They allocate capital. They decide which businesses get funded. And, folks on the call probably, understand that women CEOs get 2% of venture capital dollars. You think it's a coincidence that about 4 or 5% of women VC partners, VC partners are women? That's no coincidence. So the ripple effect of these things is so tremendous. and distorting.
Right. I mean, what you said about starting early, right? When building companies, hire teams appropriately. When starting your career, financial plan appropriately. And so my question to you is, personally, I was terrible at it. I had a 401k at best. Like that was it. And it was like in T-bonds. Like it wasn't, I wasn't paying attention, but I was really good at making money. I wasn't good at managing money. And women are inherently uncomfortable, and I don't know why, to your point, because you mentioned it's the society that we're in, uncomfortable talking about money, right? And so often I'd always be like, I should learn how to golf so that I can be out there where the real conversations are happening, or this or that. But what's your advice to women as they're starting their careers or young in their careers, how to financially plan personally?
Yes. First of all, just do it. So remember that I don't want to talk about it comes from that place of isolation and shame. Some would say that's the patriarchy right there, there. But you gotta step into the game. You have to recognize you're not going to know everything. In fact, one of the benefits that men have over us is, we did some research at Ellevest when onboarding onto an investing app. If you ask a man his risk tolerance, he doesn't know. He thinks it's important, so he takes a guess, moves on. She doesn't know. She thinks it's important. She leaves and, says, I'll figure it out, and then never comes back because life gets in the way. And so the most important thing is to get started with investing early. And that's important because the power of compounding. Compounding is so counterintuitive. It means your money will grow more quickly over time. It means you earn a return on the money you invested, but after a bit, you earn a return on that money plus the return, and then on that money plus the return, on that money plus the return, and the ball gets bigger more quickly. The other thing it's important to know is the media loves to talk about, volatility in the stock market. That's a really fun topic. You can be very dramatic about it. But the investing in the stock market has been one of two ways to sustainably build wealth in our country. One historically has been to buy real estate, which has a lot of negatives to it. It's been, Black people have been redlined out of buying real estate, so it wasn't available to everyone. You have to take out a mortgage. You have to make a big down payment. Homes are expensive, and they're illiquid. It goes up about 3% a year. But a lot of people's grandparents built wealth. Investing is a superior way historically, because you don't have to have it. It's available to everybody. You don't have to have a big down payment. You don't have to take out a mortgage. It's liquid. You don't have to spend money on the garden. And it's gone up about 10% a year since the early 1900s. And that 10% compounds on itself. And so you think, oh, it's risky. Sure, if you're going to put in money for a week or a year. But if you were able to invest and stay in the stock market for 15 years, historically, you could invest on any day, something like a 98% chance of a positive return, 20 years, 99% chance, and 20 years if you also had a recurring deposit into your account, which is what we advise at Ellevest. I think you had 100% chance of a positive return. So the risky thing has not been investing. The risky thing has been staying in deposits, staying in the bank account, because you're losing money every day there. And so my advice is, find a place like an Ellevest, I hope, and start early. And by the way, if you can't start early because you didn't start today. Right. Tomorrow was good. Tomorrow, try the next day, but I wouldn't wait. And that's the other thing I say. The cost of not investing, we underestimate. If you're making $85,000 a year, you're investing, at the same rate as men do. You're putting about 10% of your take-home pay, over 5 to 10% over time into an account. What you could make there versus what you make if you stay in the in a bank deposit can be like $100 a day, $100 a day. And if you had a hole in your purse and $100 fell out of it today, when would you fix your purse? What if it happened again tomorrow? Like, you wouldn't wait. But because we don't see the money that we're not making, we tend to put it off. I mean, it takes 15 minutes, but people, I got to make all the time. It's the highest return historically, 15 minutes of anyone's life.
It's shocking how uncomfortable just entering the stock market and investing for women is. I mean, again, I'll use myself as an example. I didn't even invest until my late 30s, early 40s. And it was because my husband kept harping about, don't you understand? Don't you understand? And I didn't
Yeah.
understand. I had a great savings account with zero interest. Um, but when you do it and you actually look at the history and the data, you're like, oh my gosh, how did I not do this?
How did
So
I not do it? How did I not do it? I get it.
the getting comfortable part is the part that I think is the greatest, societal shift that we need to help
Just
women
don't
make.
look. And that's where women, when we do invest, are better investors than men. And the reason
Right.
is because we just don't look. That men in periods of volatility tend to check their accounts. And if you tend to check your account and you see it's down, you tend to panic a little bit and you tend to do something. And I don't know that this is exactly a rule of thumb, but it should be. If you're doing anything while you're panicking, you're doing the wrong thing.
Right.
And I also say investing should not be emotional. It should be just the facts, ma'am. You have someone, again, like an Ellevest, that takes in your personal details, puts together an asset allocation for you, you do the recurring deposit, it invested for you, and just,
Right.
Look occasionally, but just don't look.
That is the key, is to look occasionally. Because when I looked, woo, takes time to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? So we
For
have
sure.
some wonderful questions coming in. The first one is, any quick advice for people that unfortunately have been laid off in tech, lost homes, moved in with parents, have savings or smart ways to really allocate their severance and their
Mm,
savings in these tough times?
yeah. Look, it's important to have an emergency fund. So before it's time to invest, you want to get a few things squared away. One thing you want to definitely get squared away is whatever you've got on your credit card. That tends to be very high interest rate. So the positive things I said about compounding before when you invest, it's the reverse, for credit card. They are charging you compounding interest. And so all of us have a story. I've got mine about the dress you bought in college that cost, $50 or $80 or whatever it was, but you ended up paying $400 for it once you got the whole thing paid off. That's that's the negative power of compounding. So first of all, you want to get the credit card paid off. I do understand there are times in your life when you may have to run it up. Okay. But as soon as you can, start to work it back down. The second thing you want to do is build an emergency fund. And that's 2 to 6 months of take home pay that sits in an FDIC insured, in a bank account for you, doesn't earn a lot of interest, but is there when and as you need it because you lose your job or, the roof breaks, or I don't know why insurance never seems to pay for these things, but, things happen and you need the money. The next thing you want to do is you want to be investing in a retirement account. Now, that doesn't seem very sexy. I'd rather be investing in a brokerage account towards my goals, but you do get tax benefits from investing for retirement, which can help that money grow even more quickly, particularly if you are employed and your employer does have a match that tends to be free money. So even more money compounding for you, and from there, once you've done those things, that's when you're ready to invest. And, at Ellevest, we do goals-based investing, which can be to invest for a home in 5 years. How much do you need for that? What are the recurring deposits that you need for it? Invest to take a big trip around the world, or invest to have a kid or start a business, or certainly for retirement. For someone who's been laid off and has a severance, I'd have to look at your full situation. Investing that money feels a little risky to me because if you don't know when you're going to get the next job and when you're going to be back there earning, so you want that money to be available to you as you need it to, for your living expenses.
Right. I love what you said about credit cards, 2 to 6 months of living expenses, and then think long, right? And investing, to your point, you want to think long with it. And I think this question you may have answered in that answer, but how do you invest money and have it grow without it being invested to give men more power and negatively impact nature while still ensuring a retirement where one can thrive?
Well, that's where you got to come to Ellevest because, as I said, 99% of investment dollars in the United States are managed at companies owned by men. Just is what it is. The industry is very, very male. Again, even with the research showing that women are better investors, and that's true for individual women, which we talked about, but for women who are investing even professionally as well. So yeah, I'd come over here. We are, still majority women owned, even after, going through our Series B. Our employee base is 85% women. The money we manage the company is 100% managed by women and other underrepresented investors. In different parts of our business where we choose, third-party managers, we also look with an eye to, underrepresented investors. So I think your answer is Ellevest, I got to say. And there's no other one like us. There were a few that started when we were working to launch, but didn't make it really out of the starting gate, unfortunately.
Right. Any books that you would recommend? We talked about there's books and books and books on this topic, but Investors for Beginning. I'm sure Ellevest has their recos too.
Yeah, I would go to the Ellevest magazine. If you go to ellevest.com, there's a magazine there. And we have certainly more articles on the topic of women and money, or money through a women's lens, than anybody on the planet does. And rather than sitting down and trying to read one of those books, which, even I can't do, so boring.
I'm an article girl too. Articles.
I'd pick the titles that are most interesting to you. And you can start with beginning investing or budgeting, or what's the real cost of a career break. We've got a pretty broad range.
Wonderful. Another question. I was told to keep 12 months of living expenses in cash because I was single. Have you heard this before?
No. No, I have not.
Me neither. So
no.
Good question that we've now answered.
I'm trying to think why. Is it just because you don't have a partner in case you lose your job? Probably.
I'm guessing risk assessment there. Can you share a memorable success story from Ellevest where your mission significantly impacted an individual's financial journey? I mean, how many do you have? But
it's all the time, Michelle. It's all the time. It just, when you back up and recognize that money is women's number one source of stress, and that taking action on it is the driver of, sort of releasing, turning that source of stress into a source of strength.
Yeah.
Is all the time. I was in an elevator the other day and a young woman stopped me and said, I just withdrew money from my Ellevest account because I'm going to graduate school. And so I was able to invest and go there. We had one, I was reading the team this morning, a woman who lost her husband and didn't think she was going to be able to make it on her own, but began investing with Ellevest using a lot of the resources, the magazine resources we have. We have, webinars, we have worksheets, et cetera. She worked them through and got herself in control of her money, and said she's finally to a place where she feels stable, where she really feels like she can take care of her kids. So that was sort of, heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. A young woman who I know, invested with Ellevest and was able to buy her girlfriend an engagement ring. And now they're married. I mean, it just, and I get chills when I do it. It's, again, money is power. And so if you're building money, you're building power over your own life. I cannot state this strongly enough. Women who quit their jobs, my boss was chasing me around the desk the whole time. I thought, when I had the money, I could leave. It's that kind of power.
That's right. I mean, I was a finance major. Cash is king. And, even as an entrepreneur, cash is what gives you freedom to think clearly and make the choices that you actually want.
Absolutely.
And so if we can do that in our personal lives financially, wow. Wow. What do you look for when choosing a bank for your savings and checking accounts? And, with all the bank.
Well, the great thing about deposits is they're FDIC insured. And so, the days of, is this bank as stable? That's the reason you see the old banks, right? They're these enormous buildings with columns and stone and all that. The reason they did that is because they were trying to exude a sense of safety. The government guarantees, bank deposits up to a certain amount. So, pick the one that has the cutest mascot. Just make sure you're not have deposits over the $250,000 FDIC insurance limit.
That's right. So, I think the crux of this this seminar and this conversation is really comfort. And so how do women comfortably and gain confidence to navigate these conversations? Like, what are things that you see actually, impacting the mindset and the shift?
So, you've sort of hit the nail on the head. How do we talk about money? And we don't enough. We, a few years ago, did an Ellevest survey and asked women, have you heard of the gender pay gap? Yes, everybody says. Are you, are you, I hate to say victim, but, are you, I don't want to say beneficiary, but do you have a gender pay gap? No. You're like, fascinating. So everyone knows it's there, but she doesn't have it. And are you talking about it? No. If you're not talking about it, you pretty much guarantee you've got it.
Right.
So we as women have been socialized not to speak about it, that it's an embarrassing topic, that if we want it, we're jerks. And so it's a bit better with this generation beginning to speak about it, but it's not enough. And the other thing I'd say with spouses and partners, there is research that shows that the more often you talk with your spouse about money, the happier you are. Yeah. And the less often you talk about money with your spouse, the unhappier you are. And I think, that's because money is both power and vulnerability, and it's your future, and it's your kids, and it's your pup, and it's what you want. And, if you're having those conversations all the time, and that doesn't have to be, I checked the, bank account and $32.37 is off, where did that Uber come from? Right. It's not necessarily that, but it could be, what do you value in life? And do we really want to be spending money on experiences or on things? And, how do we navigate that? I do often get the question from women I haven't spoken to. Oh, by the way, and if you don't, it's a problem, because women live 6 to 8 years longer than the men in their lives. Half of marriages end in divorce. And when she's not involved in the money and the money comes to her, often in the worst week of her life, right? 74% of women have a negative surprise. The numbers are astounding. And so if you're not involved, you have a high probability of setting yourself up for a bad outcome, which is, wait, I thought there was more money. So you got, and I also think about him, if you're in a heterosexual marriage, if he's doing it, you think, well, he's got the power, that's great. But that's a lot of responsibility too, and particularly when the male ideal in our society is someone who is taking care of the family and providing for the family. What happens if he invested in crypto and it declines, right? That isolation and uncertainty for him is a very difficult thing. And that's what often happens, is he doesn't tell her, because it doesn't conform to the image of what a caring and providing husband should do. He doesn't tell his friends, that he gets isolated, which can be a real problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think gaining the education and understanding of how it works, why it works, and what's going on is key. Like, I force myself, and it's sad that I have to say force myself, but I look at it every single month. I look at my apps for banking once a week. And I try to understand the why and the how. And then I ask questions that probably sound silly, but I'm like, hi, question, what does this mean? Why? How did this happen? Yeah. I build companies, but I don't understand this chart. So explain it.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. By the way, we've been thinking a lot about prenups at Ellevest. When I was younger, very anti-prenup. Well, why would you negotiate the divorce before you get divorced? If you think you're going to divorce, don't get married, and blah, blah, blah. And, my husband brought the topic up like the week before we got married. It was like this terror. It was horrible. It's horrible. I've completely changed my mind because someone said something to me that I thought was, I think it's on our Instagram maybe today, which is, if you have a prenup, you have a prenup. It's the laws of the state in which you got married, in which you live. That's your prenup. You like that prenup, or is there a fairer one? And so I thought that was interesting. There's some things you just, with money, everybody has a prenup. By the way, I also say everybody's an impact investor. We think about ESG, environmental and social governance and investing, and we talk about that. But at our core, we're all making an impact with our money. We may not know what that impact is, but it's all about who you're supporting, and
Right.
what you're investing in.
Right. And you do it where you're comfortable, right? I invest in female founders. Am I great at investing in female founders versus the stock market? I mean, debatable, right? But that's where I'm comfortable. So, one of this question that I love is, many women have left corporate America in the past 5 years and become their own boss and found creative ways to create financial freedom. How can Ellevest help them? Us.
Well, become a client for sure.
Right.
That's our core reason for being. The other way is that for our private wealth clients, those who are accredited investors, who have $1 million or more to invest, we often invest in women founders for them, so that we definitely have the 60-40 portfolio or the asset allocation or those things. But for those women who can, afford and assume the risk of a private investment, we'll invest in women-run venture funds, investing in women, or femtech funds, which is, women's health, or workforce housing, fixed up sustainably in the Carolinas, rented to women who are in transition. And so we try to, in every way, be very thoughtful about how we invest in women. And again, we're majority women owned, we're majority women. The assets are managed by women, and many of the assets are invested in women. And so that's not available for everyone, because you have to be a sophisticated investor in order to do it. But we do try to, have this through line of investing in women.
I love this. I mean, one thing that, I found helpful, and I'd love to know if you have any tips to further drive this, is find your peers or your friends that you're comfortable starting to have these conversations with, right? So I do it with fellow female founders. We'll text, we'll chat about things that we're investing in, or like, oh, have you heard of this and that? And it actually starts to get your mind to shift through, like, what is this investment platform? Why would I do this versus that? Mortgage rates, taxes, insurance, things that like we never talk about, but should. Are there forums, obviously Ellevest provides, I'm guessing, or ways that people can get more comfortable the way that you are? I mean, it's fantastic what you're providing, but again, it's comfort. We need t-shirts that say that.
As part of our Ellevest membership, when you become an Ellevest client, we do any number of webinars, and then we'll do one-on-one sessions as well. So you can go to the webinar on budgeting and then have a session with someone where you work through your own budget. We recently, in our comprehensive financial plans, have rolled out several, which I think the world has just been waiting for. Comprehensive divorce financial plan, you go through divorce, you have a lawyer, but women tend to take a big hit in terms of wealth when they get divorced, something like 44% decline, something ridiculous. But having certified divorce specialists on staff and spending time with women who are going through divorce is a new offering, as well as an inheritance. I mean, that's another big movement of wealth, the great wealth transfer you probably heard of, where the boomers are beginning to die off. And if you come into some wealth, expectedly or unexpectedly, how do you manage through that as well? So lots of means to gather one-on-one or in groups, in which individual women can learn about money.
I love it. I mean, financial knowledge equals financial freedom, and that's what Ellevest is providing. So number one, thank you for doing what you do, because I know it's not easy.
No, it's not
Building
easy.
a company, raising through a Series B.
Ugh.
Oh my gosh.
Horrible. It was horrible.
And that also kind of contributes to the landscape that we're in, right? And why this is so important that we all get comfortable talking about what's really important amongst our female peers, and just really thinking about what matters. And that is, having these, what feels like uncomfortable conversations soon to be comfortable. Is there any last, I would say, people always ask you, like, what's your greatest advice, or what's top of mind? I would say to you, what are you thinking about right now? And what do you want people to know and hear from you today in this moment?
Well, I think we've talked about some of it. I just saw someone in the chat, do you have anything for, 18 and 19-year-olds? How can I get my daughter started early? We do. In fact, I'd love to say at Ellevest, we have no minimum, we have no maximum. And so we work with women, typically women who have agency over their own money. As soon as they've got that credit card debt paid off, we've got a digital offering that's available for them. And then you can graduate up to, having a financial planner work with you one-on-one, or a financial advisor. And, our largest clients are in the tens of millions. And it was important to me that we were really there for her at every step of her journey, to really, help her and support her on this issue. And we feel very much the responsibility of what we do, because we are the only firm that we know of, certainly of this size, and we recently passed $2 billion in assets under management, that was built centered on women. Everything else centers men, but we really try to, at every step of the way, again, recognizing it's not this risk aversion, it's a risk awareness and wanting to understand risk, that drives some of the differences. So anyway, I hope you'll come and check us out. We know we're not in Canada, unfortunately. I did see someone say, is the L in French? Yes. The concept was the Frenchy plus invest is what made Ellevest, but unfortunately we're not in France either. You have to have a US address.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Sallie. Thank you. Ellevest. Thank you for your invaluable insights today. Everyone, I know we're so thankful for the change that you're driving. Take note and make it happen.
Michelle, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.